Allah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah ma ba'd. We're in Surah Hashr. Surah Hashr, this is the second surah in the 28th parah. After Mujadala, we have Surah Hashr. Last week, we were supposed to do the first 5 ayat, and we completed 4 ayat. There was a lot of tafseer last week, and I believe repeating some of it is important, but then we won't be able to complete today's lesson. But we have to repeat it in the sense that in order to understand ayat number 5, we have to go back. Otherwise, from ayat number 6 is a completely different subject, and it's a detailed subject. So today the intention is to ayat number 6 and ayat number 7 will take up all of today, and even next week, if Allah gives us life. So in order to explain ayat number 5, we'd have to go back and explain ayat number 2, 3, 4 again. So we'll do that inshallah. But we'll recite from ayat number 6 and 7. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أفاء الله على رسوله منهم فما أوجفتم عليه من خيل ولا ركاب ولكن الله يسلط رسله على من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير ما أفاء الله على رسوله من أهل القرى فلله وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل كي لا يكون دونة بين الأغنياء منكم وما آتاكم الرسول فخذوه وما نهاكم عنه فانتهوا واتقوا الله إن الله شديد العقاب. صدق الله العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the beginning of the surah, He first noting that all things in the skies and the earth, meaning the universe, they all glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, they declare Allah ta'ala transcendent, Allah ta'ala beyond any and everything people ascribe to Him. And Allah ta'ala is the most powerful, Allah is the most wise. In other words, everything Allah does is within His power, and everything He does, He doesn't abuse it, He does it with wisdom. And then Allah ta'ala speaks about, so Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu calls this Surah Banu Nadir. We did this last week. And this first part of the surah is about the exile of Banu Nadir. And we spoke about, just in brief, we spoke about when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came to Medina, there were the tribes, the Jewish tribes that resided there. And He drew up a pact and treaty that they would not harm Him, He would not harm them. And similarly, when they needed to engage in war, they would not cause mischief in the sense of plot to destroy the Muslims, and they would not go into war supporting the opposition, even if the opposition be the Jewish tribes from some other nation, for example, some other tribe, some other area or region, because they lived in Medina. So as people of Medina residing together, we have to support each other in the sense that we won't attack each other, right? That was the support. You don't have to fight with us, but at least don't fight against us. So that was the pact. And Banu Qurayza, we spoke about Banu Qurayza, that they did breach the trust and the pact several times. And when the time came for the decision to be made, they handed over the decision to their leader, who said that basically they said that we want the decision to be made according to our law, our book, the Torah, and the decision was made that they would be slaughtered. Basically, that was from their book. Unfortunately, history or people don't know the story, so they think that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had all these people slaughtered. They themselves had it. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not have done such a thing. Anyway, that was the Banu Qurayza. Then came the Banu Nadir. They were also treacherous. Several times they tried to kill Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he went to collect blood money. That was due from both Muslims and non-Muslims. That was one treachery. And the second one was when their leader, Ka'b bin Ashraf, what happened was they knew. Actually, I missed one small detail, but it's very interesting detail, that they were actually descendants. The Banu Nadir were actually descendants of Harun alayhi salam. Very interesting. They were descendants of Harun alayhi salam. So anyhow, they had scholars among them, and because of that, they understood that their book said that they prophesied that the last and final Nabi would come in Medina. That time it was called Yathrib. They called Medina Yathrib. So that's why they moved to Yathrib many years prior. So the Banu Nadir that were in Medina, they were there for a long time, hundreds of years, awaiting the last messenger. The only thing was they thought it would be among their progeny, because theirs is the what? The family of prophets. So they moved there hoping that it would be from their progeny. But when it came among the Arabs, they couldn't take it. So they knew he was the Nabi. Even when he claimed, even when he went to war, even when he lost. Now, we mentioned this before, when he won the battle of Badr, right? They knew he was the Nabi, they knew he was the messenger. But now they're like, oh man, these guys are really being supported by Allah, they're going to win everything. If 313 went against 1,000 or 950 without arms, without experience, without preparation, and they won. They didn't just win, they had barely any casualties. If they could do that, that means they're really being helped from Allah. We have no standing chance against them, so let's not do anything. But when they apparently lost Uhud, and the Muslims, I say apparently lost because there was no real loss. There was no real win or lose. There was a loss, but they didn't lose exactly. But it apparently seemed as if they lost, right? Because they lost a lot of people, and no one really won that. Muslims came back actually to fight. At that time, the mushrikeen already left. So when they apparently lost, that's when the Jews said, nah, these guys do have a weakness. They can be taken down. Now let's do something. They still believed he was the Nabi. They still believed he was a messenger. They didn't disbelieve. They just couldn't accept it. They just couldn't accept it. So that's when they started plotting that, let's try to do something. And their leader, Ka'b bin Ashraf, went to the mushrikeen of Medina, and they made a pact. And the mushrikeen said, we're going to help you, don't worry. We have Abu Sufyan also, basically they made a pact, they made an agreement that we're going to help each other take out this prophet, take down this prophet. When Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam got news of this, treachery from both sides. One is they try to kill him when he went for the blood money, and one is they're instigating against the Muslims in Medina from the inside. Then he said, look, you're going to have 10 days. You must leave. Because you broke the treaty not once, twice, even more times. You're going to have to leave. So he gave them a chance. 10 days, you have 10 days, and you can take your belongings with you. Right? Now, I mentioned this last week. There are many lessons in this. That how did Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or how did Sharia, how did Islam treat treachery? They didn't just say kill him. Nowadays, any country, you what do you call it when a person is treacherous to his own nation? A traitor. How do they treat the traitor? They get rid of you. No chance. Subhanallah, the justice of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, justice of Sharia, leave. And where did they exile them to? Where they came from, Syria. These Jews originally came from Syria. So more than fair, more than just. This is the justice of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the Sharia. So they decided among themselves, yeah, you know what, let's go. Last week I made a major mistake actually. I kept on saying Abdullah bin Ubay bin Ka'ab. Right? One of the brothers corrected me, may Allah reward him. Is Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul. Right? Ubay bin Ka'ab I was mixing the names. Abdullah bin Ubay is right. Bin Ka'ab is wrong. It's supposed to be bin Salul. Ubay bin Ka'ab is a Sahabi. He's one of the top Sahaba, the Qadi of the Ummah. So the Munafiq's name is Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul. Right? So I kept on repeating it too. So anyhow, he told the Banu Nadir, don't leave. We got your back. We'll support you. We have 2,000 strong. That'll make sure nothing happens to you. You're good to go. So they got the himmat, the courage. They said, you know what? Let's stay then. And they stayed. They didn't leave. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam warned them, you need to go. They didn't go. That's when they had forts. They had forts and they fortified themselves. They caged themselves in. They tried to protect themselves and said, we're not going to leave. We have fortified forts. We're not going to go. And so Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Sahaba, they surrounded. After the time passed, they surrounded these forts and they said, get out. And they weren't leaving. And Sahaba couldn't take them out because they were very well protected. That's when, and this is the part we explained all of this before. Now this part is the part that we left out, and this is the last ayat. Some Sahaba started burning because they were mainly known for their date palm, their date farms. They had massive date farms. That was their business. That was their livelihood. That was their everything. Their life and their generation and their previous and their family. This was passed down. They had huge orchards, all right? Huge gardens of date trees. Huge. These were located 3 miles outside of Medina. Huge, huge gardens. Even now, the brothers are passing it around. Right? You guys should, I don't know if you guys got it. A lot of the dates we have today is from Israel. You have to be careful not to buy them. I don't know the brands, but it's going around. You can find the poster. I'm sure someone will post it. A lot of the brands, they'll give you all these beautiful Islamic names, but they're not Islamic at all. So be careful. It's better to, stay away from buying any of their things. So they had these date farms, and some of the Sahaba said, you know what? If they're not going to get out, we're going to make them get out. Destroy their what? What happens if you can't get them out? You forcefully get them out by damaging their property. So they started burning some of the trees down. They started cutting the trees down. And so other Sahaba said, listen, this doesn't look right. From one angle, what did the tree do to you? And more from the other angle, that, listen, these things are going to be spoils of war. It's going to come to us anyway. Why are you destroying it? There's no way, these people are going to lose the war. They're going to have to leave. Ultimately, these trees are going to come to us. Why would you destroy it? Doesn't make any sense. So you're actually destroying property that would belong to the Muslims. So on two angles, it wasn't right. One is the tree is, these are good fruit. Why would you waste these good fruit? And second is this would become the property of the Muslims. You're destroying the property of the Muslims. So now they were in a predicament. That's when after this happened, those Sahaba who did that, they were a little doubtful and they were regretful. They said, we made this mistake, this sin we committed. And they went to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, we committed this sin, this mistake, this wrong. What do we do now? What's the ruling? How do we fix it? Everyone understood? So this is the part that we didn't get to. Another small interesting point is that those two, so they were exiled. Ultimately, they were all. So what happened afterwards? Ultimately, they saw the Sahaba started breaking off pieces of their fortresses from the outside, their forts from the outside, because they weren't leaving, they weren't budging, and the Sahaba couldn't get in. So they started breaking their house from the outside, and then they started burning the trees down. That's when the Banu Nadir, the tribe Banu Nadir, the Jewish tribe, realized, listen, ultimately they're going to get to us and they're going to destroy us. If we surrender now, we might be able to leave in peace. And that's exactly what happened. They surrendered, and they left in peace. And of course, the ruling was that you can only take those things that you can carry. You can only take those things that you can carry in your camel, and that's it. Everything else you must leave behind, obviously, but you are not allowed to own anything here. And no weapons, of course, no weapons. You're not allowed to take any weapons. They were confiscated. So, you know how these people were, they took, out of greed, anger, animosity, they took the nails and the wooden boards and the doors. It's like, conjuice. Yeah, we don't want, if we're not going to live here, you can live here too. So they took every little thing they could. Every little thing they could, right? It's just like, out of anger and hatred. Well, at least Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam allowed them to take. When the Jews today kick out the Palestinians, they don't forget taking anything. They kill you in your home or in the road. So look at the vast difference between the way the Muslims treat those who deserve to be exiled versus the way non-Muslims treat the Muslims who don't at all deserve to be exiled. The whole international community knows also, yet no one says or does anything about it. Or they're saying, but no one's doing anything. Anyhow, and an interesting lesson is the two people that were given the responsibility of throwing the boulder from the top of the wall to crush Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they became Muslim. And so they weren't exiled. Simple. You could have at least faked being Muslim. You would have stayed there. You could have done that too, Anyhow, there's a big lesson in these few verses of tolerance and human rights. The model for present-day politicians is in the Quran. Right? This is the solution. Quran has solutions for these major societal problems that we have today. So when this happened, that's when the Sahaba were worried. What's the ruling? What do we do? What is supposed to be done? That's when Allah Ta'ala came in their defense. Allah Ta'ala came in their defense and said, listen, whatever happened, happened. You didn't do it for the wrong reasons. The reason was, what happens when you cannot reach the enemy? When you cannot reach the enemy, then damaging their property. In Sharia, there's a whole chapter on can you damage property of others. So of course, it's not permitted. It's not permitted in general to damage property of anyone else. Even in war, and we all know the rules in warfare, you're not supposed to harm elderly people, women, children, burn down trees, houses, animals. We know that already. But when the situation becomes dire, and the situation becomes very difficult, where you're unable to reach the enemy, and this enemy has done wrong and will continue to do wrong, then you may take some extreme measures. And Allah Ta'ala excused them, saying, these extreme measures you've taken, whatever happened has happened. Leave it. This was by the permission of Allah. In other words, whatever happened, Allah Ta'ala was okay with it. He allowed it, but obviously further don't do any more. Right? So this also, we come to learn that in dire circumstances, you are allowed to do certain things. And the other point is that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he is the one that said what? Okay, don't worry about it. Right? Allah Ta'ala supported that saying this was by the permission of Allah. Allah didn't tell them to do it. There's a big lesson here. Allah Ta'ala didn't tell them to do it. He said, okay, no problem. This was with Allah's permission. You were permitted. Right? Originally it's prohibited, you were permitted. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he is the one that said, don't worry about it. Allah's rule is connected with the rule of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Just as Allah is the lawgiver, the lawmaker, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has authority to mend that law, change that law, or accordingly whatever he needs to do. We need to understand that Allah, the Quran and the Sunnah are both authorities. In Islam, both Quran and Sunnah are authorities. Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam are authorities. This is very, very important because we have some misinformed individuals amongst our own who say the statement and the words of hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam hold no weight in deen. They call themselves Ahlul Quran. We call them Munkirina Hadith. We have these individuals today, right? You can find them very easily. They call themselves what? Ahlul Quran, the people of the Quran. We say, you're not Ahlul Quran. Ahlul Quran are people who are masters of the Quran, right? Yeah, we call them Munkirin al Hadith, those who make inkar, those who reject Hadith. So the ulama say such people are not out of the fold of Islam, but they're not in any real type of Islam, right? They're sinners, they're fasiq. Quran and Hadith both make up Sharia. Quran and Hadith both make up Sharia. It is the Quran and the Sunnah that we are commanded to follow, not only the Quran. The Sunnah and the Hadith is an explanation of the Quran. Without the Sunnah and Hadith, you cannot understand the Quran. Again, without the Sunnah and Hadith, you cannot understand the Quran. One more time. Without the Sunnah and Hadith, you cannot understand the Quran. This is very, very important. This is the belief of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, meaning all the Muslims. And this is not from the Hadith, it's from the Quran. From this surah specifically, an ayat will come later to denote that. As a matter of fact, I'll give it to you right now. The ayat that we read today, ayat number 7, right towards the end. Right towards the end, Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. And what Allah gives, and what Rasul gives you or brings to you, فَخُذُوهُ. Then take it. وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ. What He makes nahi, what He prohibits you from, فَانْتَهُ. Refrain from it. This is one of the main ayat and verses of the Quran that directly, not indirectly, directly refer to hadith, directly refer to the hukm, the command, the ruling, the authority of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a lawgiver and lawmaker. So there are two main sources, Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are secondary sources. You have ijma', the consensus of the ummah, and qiyas, the legal, the legal extraction or the legal interpretation of the you can say interpretation, and the ijtihad of the ulama. Anyhow, so that's another main point that we extract from here. Just going back a little bit, actually there's another point also I forgot. There was a lot of points last week, but there's some things we forgot to mention. Allah said, هُوَ الَّذِي أَخْرَجَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Going back to verse number 2 in the beginning, He is the one who أَخْرَجَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, who took out the non-believers from the Ahlul Kitab. In other words, He exiled the Jews of the people of the book, min diyarihim, from their homes, لِأَوَّلِ الْحَشْرِ. We explained it, but we didn't expound on it too much. We're going to explain just now. Awwal is first, Hashr is Hashr. What Hashr means is the gathering. We mentioned that. It also means to Hashr refers to the resurrection. Because on the resurrection, day of resurrection, everyone will be gathered. Right? And interestingly, when they were exiled to which place? Syria, where they're originally from. Where would the mahshar, the day of resurrection, where would it take place? Syria. Remember Syria, not today's Syria. Syria of that time, Sham of that time. We call the Great Levant today, which includes many countries. So some ulama say this is the reason it was called Awwal al-Hashr, yani where the gathering will be. Other ulama say no, it was called, and this is important also to know because the surah's name is also Surah Hashr. Other ulama say, look, this was the first time the Jews were kicked out. And there would be another time as well. Right? So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when He kicked them out, He allowed them to go to Sham. He also allowed them to go where? Khaybar, where He kicked out the Banu Qurayza. They were there originally, the other Jewish tribe. So He allowed them to go to Khaybar. But He did say, take out the Jews and the mushrikeen, the polytheists, from the land of Arabia. Unfortunately, the zalims today allowing everything back in. But this was the command of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just yesterday I was reading they're opening the first wine shop again in Saudi after 70 years. 70 years. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Sometimes I feel like maybe he's the Dajjal himself. Allahu Akbar. Anyway, so Umar radiallahu anhu came afterwards and he took them all out. And that was the second Hashr. So that was what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did was the first Hashr, and what Umar radiallahu anhu did was the second Hashr. That's why this is called the Awwal al-Hashr. This will be the first exile. Again, Hashr means gathering. In other words, you're gathering everyone, you're sending them back. So in that sense, this ayat, لِأَوَّلِ الْحَشْرِ refers to the first exile, and Thani Hashr would be the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. So that was also left. I don't know if there's anything else. Hopefully nothing else is left. So the end of ayat number 2, يُخْرِبُونَ let's just do the whole ayat, why not? هُوَ الَّذِي أَخْرَجَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. I'm going back to verse number 2. He is the one that exiled the non-believers from the believer of the book, in other words, the Jews, مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ from their homes. Dar, diyar, plural. لِأَوَّلِ الْحَصْرِ the first exile. You can say this. مَا ظَنَنْتُمْ أَنْ يَخْرُجُوا. O Muslims, you thought that they would not leave. وَظَنُّوا, and they thought, أَنَّهُمْ مَانِعَتُهُمْ حُصُونُهُم. Husun, from the word hisn, their fortresses, مَانِعَتُهُم, would prevent them min Allah, against Allah. That they would be protected. No one could take them out. And their fortresses were well secured. Then فَأَتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ حَيْثِ لَمْ يَحْتَسِبُوا. Allah came from where unimaginable, where they never even expected. In other words, Allah Ta'ala can do anything. Allah Ta'ala took them out completely. وَقَذَفَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الرُّعْبِ. And He cast ru'b, awe and fear in their hearts. Right? يُخْرِبُونَ بُيُوتَهُمْ. They were destroying their own homes, بِأَيْدِيهِمْ, with their own hands, وَأَيْدِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, in the hands of the believers. In other words, their homes, they were secure, they thought, right? They ended up destroying their own homes, and they became the means and cause for the Muslims destroying their homes as well. Imagine you think you're so fortified, but then you end up destroying your own home. That's the meaning of, they never even imagined where Allah came from. He came, Ajib. It's like Allah Ta'ala's army is different. He doesn't need people and things, right? Another ayat, Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. No one knows Allah's army but He. Allah sends what? Birds to destroy a whole nation. Ajib. He sends a mosquito to get rid of a tyrant. That's mosquito. Allah ke liye, for Allah, this is, nothing is, for Allah everything is easy and simple. We think it's hard. That's what Allah said. He kept saying, you thought that they wouldn't leave. They also thought that they couldn't leave. We took them out like this. We made them destroy their own homes. Right? فَاعْتَبِرُوا. So take lesson, يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ, O people of intelligence. وَلَوْلَا أَنْ كَتَبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْجَلَاءِ. And had not Allah written upon them, ordained upon them al-jala. Jala means exilement. If He didn't ordain this, لَعَذَّبَهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا. Then He would have punished them in dunya. In other words, you could have been killed, but Allah Ta'ala gave you the easier, the lesser punishment. Just leave. That's it. Simple. The treachery that you did, you committed, any other nation in the world, any other government, as just as they claim to be, they would have killed you. And that is the rule of any government. You cause treachery in the, what's the word again? You're a traitor of the government, they'll kill you and your whole family. They'll get rid of you. Right? Whichever country and nation you want to name. Even today. And that's, I guess, rightfully too. وَلَهُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ عَذَابُ النَّارِ. And they would have a painful, the punishment of the fire in the akhirah. Why? ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ شَاقُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. This is because they opposed opposed Allah and His Messenger. وَمَنْ يُشَاقِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. And those, وَمَنْ يُشَاقِ اللَّهَ, the one who opposes Allah, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Allah Ta'ala is severe in punishment. This is the verse that we didn't do, but we explained it now. مَا قَطَعْتُم مِّن لِينَةٍ. You do not cut any lina. Lina refers to date palm, date gardens, date trees. Some ulama say in Tafseer that it refers to all date trees besides the ajwa. What's the significance of that? I don't know. It's just that they cut the date trees, and I guess maybe they didn't have ajwa among those trees. Allahu A'lam, I don't know. But he's saying whichever date palm or date trees, or the date palms that you cut, أو تركتموها, or you leave them behind, قائمة, standing, على أصولها, on their by their root. In other words, you guys left some trees and you burned some trees, you cut some trees. Whatever you did, فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. This was with Allah's idhn, permission. Right? You're supposed to leave them, but Allah saying what? You cut them or you left them, don't worry. For this time, we let you go. Both are equally okay. Because you did it for the right reason. You did it for the right reason. Right? By the permission of Allah, and what's the reason? وَلِيُخْزِيَ الْفَاسِقِينَ, to disgrace the sinners, the oppressors. In other words, these guys did wrong over wrong over wrong, and then they try to justify, they try to stay, how much more wrong can you be? So this was to disgrace them. Again, you don't disgrace non-Muslims, na'udhu billah min dhalik. You only disgrace those who deserve to be. If a person is zalim, oppressor, then you have the right to. When I say you, it doesn't mean we individually can go and disgrace people. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as a whole nation, as an army, right? As a group versus another group. Now we come to today's lesson. Now today's lesson, it's already 9 o'clock. I'm not sure if we should start. It's very long actually. I'm going to try to shorten it, inshallah, but I doubt we're going to finish the 2 verses. In the next 2 verses, Allah Ta'ala talks about several concepts. Something called faith. Faith. وَمَا أَفَاءَ اللَّهِ. The next verse, مَا أَفَاءَ اللَّهِ. Faith. In order to understand faith, you have to understand 2 words. One is faith, and I'm not sure what other English word to use besides, yes, leftover property is good. Leftover property. And in Old English, they say booty, right? B-O-O-T-Y. So leftover property, I think we'll use that word. And the second word is ghanima. Ghanima. Mali ghanimat. Most of us know mali ghanimat. This is also leftover property as well. However, there's a big difference between the two. Mali ghanimat is something that is earned through warfare, through conquering, right? So example, when the Muslims took the land and the date palms of Khaybar from the Jews, they went to war, they did fight. So they conquered and then they took. So that wealth that came to them was called Mali Ghanimat. Ghanima, Ghanaim. Spoils of war is the translation for that. Spoils of war. It's different from fight. Mali fight is leftover property. And generally, the word fight is termed as those things that you achieved or received without force, without war, without conquering. What happened with the Banu Nadir, there was no fighting. Right? There was no real conquering. They had to give it up. So this was not considered mal ghanimat. Did you understand that? There was a difference between the two. And there's a reason why I'm explaining this difference. Right? We're going to get to that just now. So again, ghanima is, you can say, leftover property that is attained without war, without bloodshed, without fighting, without conquering. And mal ghanimat are spoils of war that are attained through fighting, through conquering, right? The ruling of the two are also different. Mal ghanima, the spoils of war, are distributed among categories. There are several categories it's distributed to, and they are the owners of it. Right? It's stipulated. And Mal Fay is under the full jurisdiction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He spends as he will. There's a difference. Why does this story come about? Because what happened was, when they did receive the leftover property from the Banu Nadir who left, they asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Will you distribute it to us like the way you distributed the wealth that you got from Khaybar?" Because that was distributed equally amongst the recipients that deserve it. That's when Allah Ta'ala clarified, saying, that wealth is different, this wealth is different. The ownership of that is different, the ownership of this is different. Ultimately, Allah and His Rasul own that and this, but over there in Mal Ghanima, it goes to specific categories that are already prescribed from before. And Mal Fay, it is under the full jurisdiction of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They're the same 5 categories as before, but is optional who he wants to give or how much. So this was maybe, apparently it doesn't seem relevant to us, but there's a reason why Allah brought these verses. Firstly, to clarify the doubt. Secondly, to establish all this whole separate chapter of rulings. Thirdly, to also show us that Islam and Muslims, we have our own system of economy. We have our own system of economy. We do not follow the two world systems that you have, socialism versus communism. We're in between, we have our own. We have our own. Both socialism and communism, these are systems that were adopted by the people of the world that they try to establish justice. Maybe that was their intention. But both usurp the rights, especially of the poor. And you could even say the middle class as well. They're not just. They make the rich richer or the poor poorer. Or that's socialism, right? You get the rich richer and the poor poorer. And capitalism is basically no one has the right to any wealth, any of their own wealth. No one has their own wealth. Right? What did I say? Communism is basically what? No one has right to their own wealth. I didn't say that? Oh, I'm sorry. Communism, right? So Islam is in between. Allah Ta'ala is the ultimate owner of the wealth, but He allows us to use the wealth with the condition that we give some of it away as well. Why is this different? No other religion has this. In Christianity, you have charity and almsgiving. But what's charity and almsgiving in their religion? It's an option. For us, it's not an option. Zakat is not an option. So you must take out a portion of the wealth to give others. And this helps society as a whole. So it's not, you understand? Similarly, interest and all these things are considered haram. Why? Because it usurps from the poor and just makes the rich richer, the poor poorer. It becomes difficult. And it just, you guys know, there's a whole detail of Ma'arif al-Quran. He goes into quite detail. We're not going to go into that. But it's the Islamic role or the Islamic economic system is the most just. You cannot get more just than this. May Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand, inshallah. We'll continue next week. We'll go over more details. Just, if you can just please draw the concepts of what is faith, what is mal ghanimat. Then we can continue next week easily. Again, faith is that wealth which is left behind and not attained through war and fighting, through conquering and bloodshed. And ghanimat, mal ghanimat is that which is spoils of war. It's attained through war, through conquering, and maybe bloodshed as well. So, and then the rulings of each are different as well. And Allah Ta'ala stipulated the recipients of each as well. There's another also, but it has nothing to do with this, but in case any were wondering, there's another one called kharaj and ushb. Land, tax levite on land. And land that belongs to non-Muslims is different from land that belong to Muslims. Again, the chapter of tax and everything, this is a whole separate chapter. It's not coming here, so we're not going to discuss. I just thought maybe let me throw it out. But maybe it'll come some other time. Inshallah, Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand. Wa akhiru da'wahum alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.